Here we talk about cognitive dissonance. You know that phrase? It effectively means that two things that are wholly incompatible or seemingly so with one another. Maybe it's a pair of beliefs that someone might hold that are in contrast with one another. Or maybe it's a series of statements that you or I might make. And it's obvious when they're said, at least to those who hear, maybe not to the speaker, him or herself, that they don't go with each other. That's cognitive dissonance. I'll give an example just from this weekend. I know many here were able to be at Rick Leger's service yesterday, and many kind remarks were made about the entire service. I had a lot of people, and I don't say this to brag at all. I'm just trying to make a point. A lot of people said, that was a really, really well done sermon. And not all of them, but a lot of them went on to say, I think you should preach that again tomorrow, or some this morning said, you should preach that again today so that we can remember what you said. And so what I heard was, I didn't listen to anything, but it was really good. So that's cognitive dissonance, by the way. And there's a lot of that goes on actually, and seriously, in our walk as Christian people. And the world looks at us, and when I say the world, I don't mean, I hope you know what I mean, I don't mean everybody that's not a member of the West Metro Church of Christ. I mean people who don't claim, who don't profess Christ, because they look at us, and as you've heard from many voices, many mouths this morning, we weep and we have joy, right? We say goodbye and we celebrate at the same time. To the world, that's cognitive dissonance, but to us, because of Jesus Christ, it makes perfect sense, doesn't it? Then God said, let us make man in our image, after our likeness, and let them have dominion over the fish of the sea, and over the birds of the heavens, and over the livestock, and over all the earth, and over every creeping thing that creeps the earth. So God created man in his own image. In the image of God, he created him. Male and female, he created them. And God blessed them. This will be a little more than 5 minutes, by the way, Hayden. And God blessed them, and God said to them, be fruitful and multiply, and fill the earth, and subdue it, and have dominion over the fish of the sea, and over the birds of the heavens, and over every living thing that moves on the earth. And God said, behold, I have given you every plant yielding seed that is on the face of all the earth, and every tree with seed in its fruit. You shall have them for food. And to the beast of the earth, and to every bird of the heavens, and to everything that creeps on the earth, everything that has the breath of life, I have given every green plant for food. And it was so. And God saw everything that he had made, and behold, it was very good. And there was evening, and there was morning, the sixth day. I don't know if you've ever thought about those words this way. It's only kind of come to me recently, but the act of creation itself was the ultimate act of divine hospitality. Now, we talk about hospitality, about making room for other people, correct? And usually when we talk about hospitality, we're thinking about our homes. We're thinking about getting them ready, getting them clean, getting them set up, getting the food made, getting the chairs prepared, getting the table settings ready because people are coming over. Or maybe it's small group, right? So get all the furniture lined up in a circle or something like a circle, and maybe have some snacks ready. And honey, could you finish the vacuuming? And maybe we'll do a little dusting and all that. We think of our homes, but see, God created a place for humanity. And in his own words, he gave humanity dominion over all that he had made. And he said, I've given you this so that you can be sustained, so that you can enjoy this. God created a world into which he invited the animal kingdom and he invited human beings to live, to dwell, to enjoy what he created, and to multiply. The writer of Hebrews, let brotherly love continue. Do not neglect to show hospitality to strangers, for thereby some have entertained angels unawares. Remember those who are in prison as though in prison with them, and those who are mistreated, since you also are in the body. One commentator about this wrote, this Hebrews author insists that service to God involves service to God's people. Care for one's brothers and sisters in the faith was a value that was clearly already shared by the readers of Hebrews. You look in chapters 6 and here in 13. But it gains special force as Jesus, the Son of God himself, was not ashamed of human beings, but called them his brothers and his sisters and identified fully with them by sharing in their blood and flesh. Jesus created a fellowship of faith by giving of himself so that others too might become members of God's household. And the counterpart to care for one's brothers and sisters is care for strangers, which usually meant offering travelers lodging and something to eat and drink. In the Greco-Roman period, inns were generally considered disreputable places where theft and prostitution were common. Therefore, travelers sought accommodations in private dwellings whenever possible. Although hospitality to strangers was highly regarded by Jews and Greeks, householders could hesitate to provide it because some travelers, including those who purported to be Christians, abused the privilege. Hospitality would certainly have been extended to other believers. We find that Romans 12, Romans 16, 1 Peter 4, for example. When Christians traveled, they relied on assistance from other believers in the communities that they visited, Acts 21, Philemon 22, Romans 16, etc., as did itinerant evangelists. Mutual support was crucial for the solidarity and expansion of the early church. It also seems likely that care for strangers meant aiding travelers of various sorts, not only those who belonged to the faith community. Abraham cared for angels without knowing it, not because he understood that they were from God, but it seems unlikely that the author would have expected his Christian listeners to be less hospitable than non-Christians who also assisted travelers. As a rationale, the author recalls how some cared for angels without knowing it. We just read. Abraham and Sarah welcomed 3 visitors who promised that the couple would have a son. That's Genesis 18. And Lot welcomed the angels that delivered him from the destruction of Sodom. Such stories raise the possibility that the strangers who come to the listeners may prove to be true messengers of God to them, bringing a greater blessing than they receive from their hosts. Although Hebrews has pictured the angels in God's throne room, chapter 1, and the heavenly Jerusalem, chapter 12, the author now encourages listeners to think of help that comes in less dramatic ways through divine messengers whose identity is hidden, but who bring in surprising ways the help that God has promised. Paul said in Romans, and you've heard this many, many times before, let love be genuine. Abhor what is evil. Hold fast to what is good. Love one another with brotherly affection. Outdo one another in showing honor. Do not be slothful in zeal. Be fervent in spirit. Serve the Lord. Rejoice in hope. Be patient in tribulation. be constant in prayer, contribute to the needs of the saints, and seek to show hospitality. That is because love demands it. Love demands engagement with others. Love demands humility in interacting in the presence of others. Love demands openness to others. Love demands listening to others. Love demands compassion for the plight of others. Love demands response to the cares and the needs of others. Love demands vulnerability when we encounter others. Love demands recognition of our equality to others. In other words, love demands the action of Christian hospitality. You've heard that it was said, as Landon read just a moment ago, you shall love your neighbor and hate your enemy. But I say to you, love your enemies and pray for those who persecute you, so that you may be sons of your Father who is in heaven. For He, God, makes His sun rise on the evil and on the good, and sends rain on the just and on the unjust. For if you love those who love you, what reward you have? Do not even the tax collectors do the same? And if you greet only your brothers, what more are you doing than others? Do not even the Gentiles do the same? You must therefore be perfect, as your heavenly Father is perfect. I know some read the blog that I posted this week. I know at least my wife and I did. Beyond that, I'm not sure. But at least two of us, and maybe a couple more. But I referred to an article I read. I can't think the guy's first name. His last name's Patton. That one sticks with me, right, as a military guy, military history guy. But it was a really powerful argument about biblical hospitality. Really powerful article that I highly recommend you go read. And I'm going to share a portion of that with you. Not the whole thing, but just a portion. And this is a portion of that article that he entitles, Jesus as the True Host. He wrote, the clearest example of the high water mark of biblical hospitality is the life of Jesus. But some might say, wait, how could Jesus be hospitable? He didn't even have a home. On one hand, I can sympathize with this objection. After all, though all things were created through Him and for Him, Jesus was homeless. During the days of His ministry, the Son of Man had no place to lay His head. And that's in His own words, if you recall. On the other hand, that objection is another case of the, quote, hospitality as entertaining model rearing its head, since almost all of Jesus' interactions with people can be described in terms of hospitality. If one looks at the life of Jesus and doesn't see hospitality reflected there, the problem isn't with Jesus, but with our notions of hospitality. Yes, Jesus fed people extravagantly on several occasions, but His hospitality wasn't limited to food, drink, and a smile. Rather, all God's work to conform His people to His likeness can be seen as hospitality. Jesus' stories were full of characters enacting hospitality as a way of life. Think of the hero of the parable of the Good Samaritan, a story designed to challenge and shock his hearers into silent reflection on the misbegotten thinking that they had accepted as normal. Think of the parable of the lost sheep. The Good Shepherd leaves the herd who are comfortable and safe and goes out wandering for the lost one who needs extraordinary love and brings it home. Think of the banquet host who wants his table to be full so deeply that he goes into the highways and the byways to bring everyone who will come. And what does the father in the story of the prodigal son do when his wayward child comes home? He runs to his son embraces, honors, and feasts with him. Think of the unjust steward, or the lost coin, or the mustard seed. Jesus' stories are glimpses into the world that he was trying to create. Not only did his stories point toward the reality of profound hospitality, but his presence also did. Around Jesus, bodies were made whole. The thinking of his hearers was untwisted. The storming creation was calm. Demons fled, and even death obediently ran backward. To be near Jesus was to see the world being made new. It is as if his presence was a beachhead of the kingdom of God, and all his words and actions made that other kingdom radiate out from himself, pushing back the effects of the fall and making all sad things come untrue. Finally, the host had come and was putting the house in order. I'm going to close with this statement, Hayden, and then we'll stand and sing. I firmly believe that a lifestyle of hospitality in the mold of Jesus Christ is an indicator not only of our maturity, as we read in Matthew 5, but also of the effect that the love of Christ and our salvation in him is having in our hearts.